The production of this program is made possible thanks to the support of the following and viewers like you. It is humanity's oldest indulgence, says Edward Slingerland, the author of the book Drunk. Slingerland posits that drinking intoxicating beverages has shaped human history and played a crucial role in the rise of the first large-scale societies. Drawing on evidence from archaeology, history, cognitive neuroscience, psychopharmacology, literature, and genetics, Slingerland uncovers the role alcohol played in enhancing creativity, reducing stress, and building trust. Why we like to drink is still a bit unclear. Was it an evolutionary hijack, or did we adapt to consuming fermented beverages? The subtitle of his book is How We Sipped, Danced, and Stumbled Our Way to Civilization. Slingerland says humanity's 10,000-year desire for alcohol is not an evolutionary mistake. It was a crucial element in building civilization. Slingerland says that alcohol disarms our prefrontal cortex. He says it dulls that part of the brain that is always trying to control things, that's looking for threats, that's trying to remain logical. And when the prefrontal cortex is disarmed, well, then we relax with each other. We let go enough to trust and share. In other words, alcohol has and continues to play an important role in people getting together socially, diplomatically, in business, and romantically. I invited Dr. Edward Slingerland, the author of Drunk, to join me for a conversation that matters about responsible consumption of fermented beverages and its many benefits. Edward, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
What made you start to focus in on the role that consumption of fermented beverages has played in the evolution of civilization?
So it seems a bit of a departure. I'm an early China specialist, and suddenly I'm writing a book on the history of alcohol. My colleagues were puzzled, but it actually it follows pretty directly from my previous work, particularly earlier work I did on the importance of spontaneity. So my first general audience book is called Trying Not to Try, and it's about the tension involved in consciously trying to relax. If you know, we were talking about tennis earlier. If you're trying to relax in tennis and you're thinking about it too much, you're not going to relax. And that's because you're activating the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain. When you tell yourself relax, you're actually activating the part of your brain that you want to shut down. And the early Chinese thinkers that I look at in this book came up with various techniques for trying to get around the cognitive paradox, breathing techniques, doing rituals. But it occurred to me at one point that there's a Taoist text that at one point compares a drunken person to someone who's in this state of wu-wei, effortless action. And I thought, actually, alcohol's not a bad way to get around the paradox. And maybe it's actually a cultural technology that we've developed to short circuit the cognitive paradox of consciously trying to relax. And so that's what got me interested in how we might be using alcohol as a tool.
The production of this program is made possible thanks to the support of the following and viewers like you. Let's first of all address why it's important to our own development and societal development to be able to relax. What are the benefits of getting into that state?
There are several, but the two that I really focus on in the book are enhanced creativity and enhanced social bonding and trust. So the two main effects that ethanol have in our body-brain system are, first of all, down-regulating the prefrontal cortex. So this is the part of the brain that is very important for being a functional adult. It's a center of self-control, delayed gratification, focus. You do your taxes or work through a problem. You want to have your PFC functioning. But alcohol will go in and turn down the PFC, depress its function a bit. So that's one thing it's doing. And the other thing it's doing is boosting these kind of feel-good chemicals, so serotonin, endorphins, that make you feel relaxed, make you less anxious, that make you like yourself more and like other people more. So humans, what I argue in the book is we're an unusual species in that we need to be creative. So we tend to think of creativity today maybe as kind of, artists need it, but we don't, most people don't use it in their everyday lives, but we do. We're constantly having to solve problems that involve what psychologists call lateral thinking. So not just reasoning from A to B to C, but seeing connections between things that are not obviously connected. When the PFC is in charge, it's very hard for us to do this. So the PFC interferes with lateral thinking. This is why kids are great at lateral thinking. They do nothing but lateral thinking, right? They're just constantly saying this crazy nonsense because they don't have a PFC yet that hasn't developed in children. So one of the main functions of alcohol is to give us a little vacation from the PFC, to turn back. And one way to look at it is to take us back to the kind of cognitive flexibility we had when we were children and allow us to solve creative problems that require creative insights. And that's why across the world throughout history, you see alcohol associated with artists, poets, creative types. And why, in the modern world, companies that rely on innovation like Google are aware of this and actually build in sort of a function where people who, teams of engineers who run into a wall and just can't solve a problem are provided with a whiskey room where they can go and sit in beanbag chairs and have a little really amazing single malt scotch. So that's a really important function. The other big one is this social trust. So the other weird thing about humans, we're completely dependent on technology and innovation, and therefore creativity in a way no other species is. Lions aren't like brainstorming new ways to catch gazelles. They just do whatever their genes tell them to do. The other weird thing we do is cooperate with non-relatives on a massive scale, on a scale that kind of looks more like social insects than primates. And it's a bit of a puzzle from an evolutionary perspective how we pull this off. And one of the things I argue in the book is alcohol has been a tool to help us to do that. So first of all, turning down the prefrontal cortex is basically a kind of, in the same way we shake hands when we meet someone, to the origin of that is to show you're not carrying a weapon in your dominant hand. If I sit down with you before a business negotiation or a treaty negotiation, and we have a couple beers or a shot or two, I'm taking my prefrontal cortex out and putting it on the table and saying I've cognitively disarmed. So I'm less able to deceive you, because deceiving people, manipulating people, these are all really PFC heavy operations, because I've got to keep in mind both what's true and what I'm telling you, and I have to keep them separate. I have to suppress any emotional reactions or facial expressions that have to do with what I'm telling you is true, but that I know isn't true. So you disable the PFC, you become less able to deceive people. And at the same time, you're boosting these endorphins, serotonins. You're just less, you don't want to deceive people anymore. You're feeling pretty good about yourself. You're feeling good about other people. And so across history, throughout time, across space, whenever you have people needing to get along, usually unrelated people, strangers needing to get along, everything from high level political negotiations down to a first date, the alcohol comes out. And that's because it's a really good tool for getting us into this more trusting, more willing to bond social state.
Well, I guess the metaphor that we use is it's a lubricant.
Yeah.
And I, as you're talking, I think it's very interesting when we recognize that our brains are wired to protect us, to be constantly looking for threats and for ways in which we can procreate so that we can further our gene pool on down the line. And if you don't trust others, or you're so much on guard, you're never going to get to the other part of what the brain is so driven to do, which is procreation. And so alcohol, I can see how it plays a role. But what I found interesting is in your book, you talk about the fact that we don't know exactly how and why human beings decided that the consumption of fermented beverages what we needed. Like you posed the question, well, was it a genetic hijack, or did we adapt? What have you been able to discover?
Well, we're clearly adapted to consuming ethanol in small quantities. And this is a very ancient adaptation. It goes before humans, so it goes way back in our primate lineage. We have these enzymes that are designed to break down ethanol in our body. And this is probably an adaptation to fruit consumption, to eating partially fermented fruit on the forest floor. And I'm actually doing a workshop in the spring here at Dartmouth with some primatologists to look at possible analogs to human feasting in non-human primates. So chimps, bonobos seem to gather around really fermented fruit and kind of have parties. And use it as a kind of relaxing bonding thing. So humans are adapted to eating fruit that has ethanol in it. But I think that something else, it's not just an accident that we developed higher alcoholic content beverages and made those beverages central to our social life and especially our religious rituals and our social rhythms. And so the dominant model in this, if you pick up a Psych 101 textbook, it's going to tell you people drink alcohol because it triggers a reward network in the brain, and it's an accident. There's no good reason why it does that. It's just like we figured out this, we can turn this switch and get some pleasure. And so we start doing the switch. There's nothing adaptive about it. There's no reason for it. And I just argue in the book, this can't be true because our taste for alcohol and our production and consumption of it is ancient and ubiquitous and costly. If you see something that's all three of those things, you got to figure out what the benefits are that's paying for the costs. Because if it's ubiquitous and ancient, there's been time for genetic and cultural evolution to get rid of it. And that hasn't happened in the case of alcohol consumption. So I think it is, we have a pre-adaptation in the sense that all primates are able to consume some amount of ethanol. But I think that really it's a cultural adaptation to this weird ecological niche that humans occupy, especially in large-scale societies, where our biology is basically primate biology, kind of suspicious chimpanzee, tribal psychology, but somehow we live in these huge cities like Vancouver, and we cooperate with strangers every day, and we sit on a bus and don't kill people next to us. And so we have all kinds of cultural inventions to help us do that, including religion. That's an important adaptation as well. But alcohol has been a crucial tool in allowing us to make, especially in making that transition from small scale societies to large scale societies.
The production of this program is made possible thanks to the support of the following and viewers like you.
So throughout the vast amount of human history, we're not talking about alcoholic beverages that you can buy today. We've gotten better at refining and boosting the alcohol content. Is it important to keep that in mind? Because I can hear people going, well, hang on a second, you're advocating that people drink. And there are some people who are going to go, no, you shouldn't be doing that. What are we talking about? Like, how much alcohol does it take to get you into that state that Mihai Csikszentmihalyi describes as flow, and which, of course, in your other book, Trying Not to Try, says that we've got to get there. Is there sort of a magic amount that you go, yeah, that's the right dose?
Yeah, 0.08 blood alcohol content. It's about, most of the benefits that I explore in the book seem to peak at about 0.08 BAC. So this is right around where you shouldn't operate a motor vehicle. And it's about 2 drinks in for most people. It really depends on the drink and whether you've eaten. One of the really crucial arguments in my book is that even though we've been using alcohol as a tool for as long as we've been doing anything in an organized fashion as a species, so at least for 13,000 years and probably much longer, way before agriculture, for most of its history, almost all of our experience with alcohol, it's come with these two safety features that have only relatively recently been disabled. So one of them is the limits of natural fermentation. So if you're making a naturally fermented beer or wine, the yeast at a certain point shut down. So they're more resistant to alcohol than bacteria are, which is why they're producing the alcohol. But they're not infinitely resistant. And so there's just a limit to how strong a beer or wine can get before the yeast just stop producing alcohol. And we've been ruthlessly breeding tougher and tougher yeast, so we can get some pretty strong wines now. Like you can get a 16.5% Shiraz. But historically, we were drinking 2 to 3% ABV beers and slightly stronger fruit wines. This safety feature gets completely thrown out the window when we invent distillation on a large industrial scale to a point that people have access to distilled liquor. Distilled liquor circumvents the safety feature and pulls the alcohol off and concentrates it till you can get like 90 something percent ABV vodkas and gins. This is just scarily strong stuff. It's just our body, the primate system to detoxify ethanol can't handle ethanol coming in at that concentration. So you can go from zero to falling down drunk in 20 minutes doing shots of vodka. Whereas 2 to 3% ABV beer, you could drink all day and you never get dangerously drunk. I call this the distillation danger. The other danger I call isolation, because historically we've never had private access to alcohol. The only time you drank was in public with other people, and usually in situations that were very ritually controlled. There's kind of rules about when you get to drink, how much you drink. Even if you think about informal situations like going to the pub with friends, you typically order in rounds. So if I have maybe an alcohol problem and I drink a little bit too much, I pound my beer, but I've got to wait until everyone else is done before we order another round. That helps me to moderate my consumption. Again, all of this is thrown out the window when you saw this in COVID, where you could call your local liquor store and they'd deliver a case of tequila to your apartment. It's nuts. So you could have, in your apartment enough alcohol to kill a small village full of people. And there's no one there ritually controlling your consumption of it. So this is a completely novel evolutionary situation that makes alcohol a lot more dangerous. So I do think we have to be a lot more careful about alcohol consumption in the modern world.
The production of this program is made possible thanks to the support of the following and viewers like you.
Why was it in the past that the only way that you could consume alcoholic beverages was in some kind of communal environment?
I think it's an implicit recognition of the potential danger of alcohol. All the cultures that I know of that use alcohol are worried about it as well. So for the ancient Greeks, Dionysus was, the god of wine, was very important. You worship Dionysus, but you're also a little afraid of him and his followers. If you run into his followers in the woods and the mountains, you could get into a lot of trouble. There's a dark side to alcohol. It's functional, but it's also dangerous. And everyone's always recognized this. And I'm a specialist in early China. And, the standard trope in Chinese history is every dynasty falls because of womanizing and drinking on the part of the rulers. So that, this alcohol is this very potentially dangerous thing. So I think that's why cultures have always had these rituals to help us drink safely. So for the Greeks, at the Greek symposium, the host passes around the wine, and they decide when to pass it around. They decide how much water to add to it. So the Greeks watered down their wine, and that way they're controlling everyone's consumption. In a traditional Chinese banquet, this is still the case sometimes today. You have alcohol at your side, but you don't drink it until someone makes a toast. And who gets to make a toast, how often, this is all ritually controlled. So we do have these very clever ways to help people drink safely in traditional societies.
It wouldn't be unreasonable for somebody right at the moment going, but hang on a second. You told me that if I consume a couple of drinks, it's going to help me get closer to that flow state. And I'm dealing with this challenge right now that I need to be innovative or creative about. But I can't consume that on my own. It's a tricky kind of balance, isn't it?
It is a tricky balance. And I violate my own recommendations not infrequently. When I was writing the proposal for Drunk, I did about 10, 12 versions, and my agent kept sending them back and saying, this is not good. I'm not going to send this out. And she was right. It was all the science was there, the basic arguments were there, but it was boring. Like I was like, well, it's puzzling why people consume alcohol. It's very dangerous. Here's some ideas. And I realized I hadn't taken my own advice about the creativity stuff. I hadn't written any of it drunk. And so I was at a conference trip, and I had a couple hours before dinner with my colleagues. And I went down to the hotel bar, but kind of by myself. But I mean, bars are funny because ideally bartenders, cocktail servers are serving the role of the symposiarch. They're kind of controlling your consumption if they're doing their job right. But I went down there and ordered a Negroni and had my laptop. And by the end of that Negroni, what's now the first 2 pages of the book basically revealed themselves to me. Like the experience was really like taking dictation. I didn't feel like I was writing it myself. And so that was drinking alone. It was drinking distilled liquor, which I say we should be really careful about. But I needed this creative insight to help come up with a catchy hook for the beginning of the book, and it enabled me to do that. So these are guidelines that you can be flexible with.
Yeah, I know that feeling that you're talking about. All of a sudden, like the letters are flowing off the tips of your fingers on the keyboard, and you're going, I don't know where this came from, but you're in that state of mind, and creativity blossoms. But I think the point that you make is that it plays a very important role at the right time in our lives, but responsibility is also something that we have to have individually and collectively, looking out for one another.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, thank you for giving us a little insight into your book. I encourage people to read it because it's filled with remarkable insights. And, where possible, I want to be able to get into that flow state because I work in a creative sector, and it also feels good. It really does.
Yes, it also feels good. Yeah, and at the end of the book, I argue that that's not irrelevant. That it also makes us feel good. So we shouldn't discount that.
Well, thank you very much.